Hello, welcome to the Macedonia Mayor's Court. We will begin our court session in just a few minutes, but before we do, we would like to give you some information with regard to the plea alternatives that are available to you, as well as the rights that all of you have when you come to court. When you come to court, you have available to you a number of constitutional rights. You have the right to know the charges against you and the maximum fines and penalties. I will make sure to advise you of that when you and I initially meet about your case. You have the right to confront witnesses testifying against you and to cross-examine those witnesses. You have the right to testify yourself or to remain silent, and no one can comment on your silence. You have the right to compel witnesses to attend court proceedings through the court's power of subpoena. You have the right to a trial before a judge, or in certain instances a jury, and the right to be represented at any such trial. If you are choosing to resolve your case with a guilty plea or, if appropriate, a no contest plea, by entering into that plea, by signing the waiver and acknowledgement of rights form, you are acknowledging that you understand all of your rights, and you further understand that when you plead guilty or no contest, you are knowingly, voluntarily, and intelligently waiving those rights. Put in its most simplest terms, these are trial rights, and if you are electing to plead guilty or no contest, you're not going to be going to trial, and therefore they are rights that you are not going to be using. For most of you, you will have two plea alternatives, guilty or not guilty. By pleading guilty, you are admitting fault or guilt and proceeding to sentencing. You will have an opportunity to address the magistrate and tell him anything that you think he ought to know with regard to your case. If you are pleading not guilty, you are indicating to the court that you wish to proceed to a trial. Any not guilty pleas are going to be transferred to the Stowe Municipal Court. You will see the magistrate, he will order the transfer, and then you will see one of our clerks in our clerk's office. They will in turn have you sign some documentation relative to the transfer, and you will get a date for your initial appearance at the Stowe Municipal Court. Please note that the date you are given for your appearance at Stowe is your arraignment, and that is because when a case is transferred from one court to another, it starts all over again in that new court. You will have the matter scheduled for a trial, but it will not be a trial on your initial court date. There is a third plea alternative, which is your no contest plea. That plea is typically reserved for those situations where there has been some injury to persons or damage to property. And the concern is that what brings you to court could result in some type of civil lawsuit or related complaint. Your typical no contest plea is if you are, for example, cited into court for an automobile accident and you were deemed at fault in that accident. If you were to come into court and plead guilty to those charges, that guilty plea would be deemed an admission of fault or guilt on your part that could be used against you to determine fault or liability in any civil lawsuit. By pleading no contest, you are not admitting fault or guilt, and therefore that plea cannot be used against you in any subsequent or civil suit. So that is your typical situation where a no contest plea would be appropriate with regard to the circumstances. When you plead no contest, please be mindful of the fact that you are acknowledging or admitting that the facts set forth in the charging documents, that would be your traffic ticket, your criminal complaint, or your misdemeanor citation. By pleading no contest, you're admitting the facts in those documents are true. And if the court accepts your no contest plea, and if the facts that are set forth do constitute the elements of the offense or offenses you are charged with, you will be found guilty on a no contest plea. And when you plead no contest, you are submitting yourself to being found guilty of that plea if the circumstances and the facts warrant. As with the not guilty plea, if you plead no contest, you will have an opportunity to address the magistrate and indicate to the magistrate anything that you think he or she needs to know with regard to the charges against you or the circumstances that bring you to court. There are certain offenses that are enhanceable. If you are charged, for example, with the charge of operating a vehicle while under the influence, you will be told that if there is a conviction of that offense, that conviction could be used to enhance any subsequent conviction down the road. And what that means for you is that the penalties and those subsequent convictions could be, and in certain instances will be, more enhanced or higher as a matter of law. If you are here for that offense, we will give you additional information as to how enhancement will affect you, but please know that OVI is one of the charges that is enhanceable if you have subsequent convictions after your appearance here today. Enhancement also applies with respect to driving under suspension. If you are here for the charge of driving under suspension, we will talk about the type of suspension that you have, the number of points that attach, the potential fines and penalties, and the issue of enhancement. There are still some driving under suspensions that are 6 points and are first-degree misdemeanors with potential fine of up to $1,000 up to 180 days in jail. However, the good news is that due to some fairly recent changes, most of the driving under suspensions that you will face today are what are called unclassified misdemeanors or 2-point violations. So if I tell you that you are charged with an unclassified misdemeanor, you are charged with the lesser of those 2 suspensions. There will be a fine of up to $1,000, no potential for jail. There is an optional license suspension, but if you become valid, there is no new suspension imposed on your privilege to drive. With regard to these unclassified misdemeanors, just know that they are enhanceable. There are different formulas, but the basic one is that if you have 3 within a 3-year period, then the driving under suspension can enhance or elevate from something with no jail time to something with the potential for jail time. If you are here on a driving under suspension, we are more than happy to give you a continuance so that you can clear up the suspension and come back valid. If you are here for the first time on a case and you do not know how you want to resolve your case, you may need some additional time to consider your alternatives, possibly to discuss the case with family or friends, or even to obtain counsel. Please let us know that you need more time or are seeking a continuance. If you are seeking a continuance, we will provide you with 2 documents. The first is a time waiver. The time waiver is exactly what it sounds like. It's all about time. If you sign that document, you are extending the life of your case beyond 30 days. The second document is a motion and entry of continuance. You and I will talk about a court date in which you will come back. We'll include that on the motion, and by signing and dating the motion, you are acknowledging to the court that you are seeking the continuance and that we're giving it to you at your request. You will approach the magistrate. If he grants the continuance, he will give you a piece of paper with your next court date, and you are free to leave. Just make sure we see you back on that date. If you are not a United States citizen, please be mindful of the fact that anything that occurs in court can conceivably impact your immigration status or your ability to either remain in the United States or become a citizen. If that is an issue for you and you have any concern whatsoever that what brings you to court could in some way negatively impact your immigration status, we're happy to give you a continuance so that you can determine whether what brings you to court will in any way harm you with regard to immigration issues. Please know also that anything that occurs in court today will be reported to either law enforcement or to the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. If you have any questions with regard to any of the issues that we have discussed, feel free to ask me, the magistrate, or any of our court personnel. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a good day.